Hi everyone, and you are welcome to the first lecture in this course, Introduction to Programming. In this lecture, I'm going to define what a computer is, I will show you what the main computer components are, and I will talk about the language that the computer can understand. After that, some important concepts will be defined, like a programming language and a program. Then we will talk about translators and translators types, and we will see how programs are executed on computers. Finally, I will end up this lecture by a quick summary. So let's get started. First of all, let me tell you that this lecture is for absolute beginners who want to learn programming for the first time. So if you find these outlines very familiar to you, feel free to move to the next lecture. Let's start talking about computer. So what's a computer? Computer is an electronic device that's able to store and process data according to the given instructions through programs. From this definition, we can understand that the computer does two main jobs. The computer stores data and processes this data. Maybe now we ask ourselves, how does the computer understand what to do? Let me answer you. Simply, we tell the computer what to do through some provided recipes, and these recipes are known as programs. From the previous slide, we see that the computer can do two main jobs. It stores data and processes this data. The question now is how the computer can do that. In fact, computer has several components enabling it from doing that. In my point of view, computers are very similar to humans, where we, as humans, usually we use our brains to process the data that we receive through our eyes, ears, etc. Also, the computer has a CPU, Central Processing Unit, and this CPU represents the computer brain and it does all the required calculation and processing. Also, we as humans, we have a short-term memory and a long-term memory. In the computer, we have a RAM, and RAM represents the short-term memory. And we call it short-term memory because it becomes totally empty once the computer is turned off. Therefore, there is a long-term memory, and usually we use this memory to store the data that we want to keep even after we turn off the computer. Hard disk represents the long-term memory in the computer. So to summarize, CPU processes the data in the computer, and RAM and hard disk store the data. Now let's move forward and talk about the language that the computer can understand. In fact, computer can understand only the binary language. In other words, computer can understand only 1 and 0. So for example, if I want to add one number to another, I have to send add instruction. And this instruction should be encoded in binary language. So for example, add instruction will be 000011100010. If I want to subtract one number from another, also I have to send subtract instruction, and this instruction should be encoded also in binary language like what you see here. From these instructions, we can see that it's very hard for a human to remember all of these instructions, and it's very hectic to communicate with the computer using binary language. To overcome this issue, people have developed what we call high-level programming language. So programming language is a tool which we use to write programs that should be executed by the computer. I mentioned that these programming language are high-level because in this programming language we use English keywords to communicate with computers. And I know that right now, the logical question that comes to your mind is how the computer can understand English keywords if it understands only 0 and 1. Before I answer this question, let me define what a program is. Program is a set of commands written in a specific programming language in a logical order to solve a specific problem. The key point to be kept in our mind from this definition that usually we write programs to solve problems. Now let me get back to my question. If we write our programs using English keywords, how the computers can understand these instructions? The answer is very simple. When people developed a programming language, they also developed what we call a translator. And the job of the translator is to take our program, which is written in English keywords, and translates this program into binary code or the language that the computer can understand. So as you see here, the program that we write, and usually we call it source code, will go to the translator. The translator will translate this program and convert this program into binary language. And this program here written in binary language is called binary code or object code. Now, and after we understand what the translator job is, let's talk about translators types. Mainly, there are two types of translators. We have compilers and interpreters. First, let's start talking about compilers. Compiler scans the whole source code and translates the whole program at a time, and then this program will be sent to the CPU for execution. Whereas in case of interpreter, it translates the source code line by line. In other words, it translates one line at a time, send this line to the execution, and then it will translate another line and send this line again to the execution, and we repeat the same cycle again and again in the case of interpreter. The detailed comparison between compilers and interpreters are out of the scope of this course. Now let's see how programs are executed on computers. Let me assume that I have a program and it's already translated into machine language or binary language. The first thing will happen that this program will be loaded inside the memory. As we see here, we have multiple instructions inside the memory. After that, the CPU will read the first instruction, decodes this instruction, executes this instruction, and then the CPU will write the result of execution of this instruction to the memory again. So the cycle is fetch, decode, execute, write back. And this cycle is known as instruction execution cycle. The CPU will repeat this cycle for each instruction inside the program until the whole program has been executed. Now let's recap what we have learned in this lecture. First of all, computer has been defined, and we see that the two main jobs of computer is to store data and to process this data. After that, we see the main computer components, and we see that we have CPU, RAM, and hard disk. Then we talk about the natural language of computer, and we see that the computer can understand only binary language, which is 0 and 1. And to make the communication between the human and computer easy, people developed programming languages. And we see that a programming language, it's a tool to write programs, commands. Then we defined what a program is, and we see it's just a set of commands to solve a problem. And keep in your mind that we write programs to solve problems. After that, we see how computers can execute programs, and we talk about the instruction execution cycle, which include fetch, decode, execute, and write the result back in the memory. That's all for this lecture. Thank you very much for your time, and if you are available, join me in the next lecture.